Adoption Video Infant Blog. So I've never thought about adopting a child. Um, I'm not exactly in the age range to think about adopting a child, so it's not really been something that has come up in my mind. It could be something to consider later in life as I have not reached any sort of generational point on wanting to have a child. Um, so fostering could also be an option at that point. At this time, not really certain. So, for some of the questions that I encountered, I notice a lot of times people they're very concerned about health status because, and a lot of times, closed adoptions, you do not get a health history. But in more recent times, closed adoptions have been sitting at about 5%, and of all the adoptions, majority are open or partially open. There have also been um, a lot more policies that have opened up to put in more and more documentation from the birth family and the birth parents on the health and health status and health family history. That would have been one question that I definitely would have asked, and it was one that was very concerning for me. So, another common question that people ask is, am I ready to adopt a child? There's no definite answer, but this is definitely a question that should have been asked prior to adopting a child, as you never know. If someone could think they're ready to adopt a child, but maybe they're not. A lot of times, adoptions are occurring after a couple notices infertility. So, this is particularly in same sex couples, infertility occurring usually, people who want to start a family end up turning to adoption or surrogacy. So, are you ready to have a child after the loss of another? Are you ready to have a child after years of infertility? It's very unlikely that an adoption process will start and end because of the family being not ready. There's only 10% I've actually not like fully gone through an adoption process and have been a failure to place or finalize. So it's really about, can you take on the responsibility and should you take on the responsibility? So, what is the process? This should be something every single parent should know prior to adoption. In the US, the process is very long. For an international adoption, it can take up to 5 years to complete. So that kind of encompasses the licensing, the home visits, the payments, the all the documentation you have to do, and all the education you have to do before adopting a child. Um, the licensing alone can take up to 2 years for foster parents, which you have to do before becoming the adopted parent. Usually, you foster said child for a certain amount of time until the finalization process starts. But it can take a long time, and it's a lot of legal conversations, and it's a lot of money. So it's more of, you should know before entering this process what is it like. I never knew what it was fully like. I didn't know it could take 5 years. That's something that definitely should be talked about before adopting a child. So, what should potential couples know about adopting a child in the US? They need to know a lot of things. They need to know the legal process, which I just described in the last slide. They need to know what they can and can't do, what they should do, how to do it, the different steps they have to take, because if they don't take the steps properly, they get sent back to square one and they have to essentially restart. They need to know about home visits. They need to know what DCF is looking for, what all the departments are looking for. They need to know what they can do to make their home habitable for an adopted child or foster child. They need to know the different steps that they will take and these agencies take to ensure a welfare of a child, and also to ensure welfare if they have children of their own already. They should also know the different types of adoption. There are, I believe, 3 types, and that would be domestic, uh, which is usually in state, familial, and then international. International, obviously outside the country. Familial, or I believe it has another term, is usually in family, which that is a majority of adoptions. A lot of times children are adopted by grandparents or other relatives due to unforeseen circumstances. Someone should also be well aware of the cost. So it can take $20,000 to $50,000 for um, a domestic adoption, but it can also be a little bit more pricey for international. It can be roughly 60,000 plus because you have to also include the travel costs, the cost of bringing the child over, the costs, all the normal costs, and then everything added on because it's another country. Um, they should really be prepared for also, there's a tax credit with um, adopting a child because it's a little bit of a offset expense, or it takes off a little bit more expense due to how costly it is, and also to promote adoption. Um, Foster care adoption, a lot of times the cost is incredibly low, but it still can be expensive. Um, Usually it's helped with the state because of a lot of times the children are wards of the state. The state usually covers a lot of the expenses, and it's kind of more of the more normal adoptions. A lot of times people are foster parents and then they adopt the child they are fostering. People should also really know when they're emotionally ready. As I said previously, a lot of times people adopt, specifically in same-sex couples, adopt a child due to infertility, unable to conceive, or a lot more hard and complicated emotional events in their lives. And you really need to know when you're emotionally ready. And a lot of times, after the loss of a child or loss of a baby, they're not emotionally ready. But that can really weigh down the process. It can make the process harder. It can make it more emotional for them. It can make the raising the child harder for them. And a lot of times, it's just very, the process doesn't always go fully through. And it also can have a lot of roadblocks, and there can be a lot of issues. And it's just, you need to be able to handle the stress of adopting a child, as well as the stress of why you couldn't have your own. And that's another like little balance that a lot of times couples tend to really struggle with. But that is my presentation.